Cheers, my internet friend. Glad you found your way here. First time? Smash that subscribe, pass this along to your circle, and drop your hometown in the comments. After almost 25 years as Melissa's husband, I didn't need her to speak to know when something had shifted. I'd long since learned to read her without words. The prolonged glance, the careful way she'd place her utensils, or the way she'd twist her hair into a bun with absent-minded precision. That night, the moment I stepped into the house after another grueling day at the office, I could tell something wasn't right. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged. Usually I'd hear her in the kitchen, maybe the clatter of pans or a running faucet, but she was seated at the dining table instead, a bottle of wine already uncorked, 2 glasses set before her. Melissa wasn't one to drink without a reason, usually only on holidays or birthdays. "Craig," she said softly, her fingers clutched around the stem of her glass like it anchored her. I managed a faint, cordial smile and dropped my keys onto the counter. "What's the occasion?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Did I forget a date?" Her smile was tight and hollow, more gesture than feeling. "Sit. We should talk." Those 5 words dropped like a lead weight between us. I lowered myself into the chair across from her. She topped off the second glass, nudging it toward me with deliberate care. Too controlled, too precise. "I've been reflecting," she began, her tone practiced and deliberate. "On my life. On us, and on who I am when I'm not someone's wife." I kept my voice even. "All right, and what have you realized?" She let out a steady exhale. "For so long, I've been wrapped up in being your partner, in raising our kids, managing everything. Somewhere in the process, I stopped recognizing myself. I need some distance, a break. Time to figure out what I actually want from life." Her hand tightened slightly around the glass. She wasn't finished. "There's this work retreat coming up. It's an overnight thing," she added, watching for a reaction. "I think it'll give me clarity." I nodded, but something about the explanation didn't sit right. Melissa had never once mentioned a retreat, and her refusal to meet my eyes said more than the words she'd rehearsed. Still, I gave nothing away. My expression stayed flat. "If you think it'll help," I said quietly. Inside, though, I was already analyzing everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't question the timing. 2 decades of marriage had taught me that silence often yielded more answers than confrontation. What mattered now was observing and preparing. Her mention of an overnight trip lingered in my mind like an echo. That evening I said nothing more. I nodded when it seemed appropriate and kept my face unreadable. But the following morning, just before heading to the office, I grabbed the family tablet. Melissa used it from time to time for shopping and light browsing. She must have forgotten that her phone was still synced to it. It only took a few taps to find what I was looking for. Her recent messages were still logged. They weren't with coworkers. They were with someone named Lucas Reed. I recognized the name. He was one of the vendors she'd coordinated with at work. There was no room for misinterpretation. The messages detailed dinner plans, a hotel reservation, and a schedule laid out for Friday night. One message stood out: "Can't wait to feel alive again." That was where I stopped reading. I closed the tablet and rested it on the counter, then sat alone at the kitchen table, letting the reality settle in. Nearly 25 years together, and she was orchestrating a romantic getaway under the cover of a company retreat. By lunchtime, my mind was already made up. Years ago, during a renovation debacle, my sister Naomi had put me in contact with a private investigator named Harper Quinn. He'd been efficient, discreet, and thorough. I'd kept his number just in case. I dialed him, laid out the situation, and asked if he could monitor Melissa's activity that Friday night. Harper didn't waste time with small talk. By the end of the day, he'd sent over confirmation. Lucas had reserved a rooftop dinner at Skyline and booked a room at the West Haven Hotel. Harper included screenshots, emails, receipts, time-stamped reservations. I didn't feel rage, only clarity. That night, Melissa spoke about her supposed retreat as if it were business as usual. She smiled between bites, talked about packing, logistics, and the schedule. I listened, nodding, saying very little. She thought she still held control of the narrative. But I already had the truth. Once Harper confirmed both the dinner and hotel, my next step became self-evident. Proof without action meant nothing. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. What I needed was a clean, irreversible end. The next morning, I contacted Jonathan Klein, a divorce lawyer I knew through mutual professional circles. Jonathan didn't bother with pleasantries. He was efficient, direct, and unflinching. Once I laid out the situation, he outlined the plan, every step with the precision of someone who'd done this many times before. The official basis for the divorce would be cited as infidelity, with Quinn's meticulous documentation to support the claim. We examined every aspect of how and where Melissa would be served, and in the end, I selected Friday evening, right in the middle of her dinner outing, as the most poignant and deliberate moment. Jonathan agreed. The symbolism was too precise to ignore. We finalized the logistics together. I would retain temporary control of the home, we safeguarded our joint finances, and her belongings were boxed and set aside for storage. Jonathan arranged for a professional process server to hand her the papers directly at the restaurant she was planning to visit. Over the next 2 days, I maintained a facade of normalcy. Melissa moved about the house as if life were perfectly ordinary, even cheerful, humming softly while folding laundry and laying out plans for her upcoming weekend. She was confident I remained unaware. But each of her movements toward that Friday only served to confirm my decision. She wasn't walking toward independence. She was stepping directly into exposure. By Thursday night, everything was in place. The legal documents finalized, the locksmith scheduled, her packed items sorted and labeled in the garage. Emotionally, we were already finished. But I wanted the moment of closure to land with clarity. On the evening, she thought she was crafting a new narrative for herself. When Friday arrived, I felt calm and sure. Melissa left a little before sunset, carrying a small overnight bag and wearing a radiant smile I hadn't seen in a long time. She kissed my cheek with the ease of routine, as if we were still a functioning couple. I walked her to the door, nodded once, and watched her drive away without hesitation. By 7 that evening, I was parked in my car just across from Skyline Rooftop. From my vantage point, I saw her step out of a taxi, wearing a bold red dress I didn't recognize. Lucas Reed was already there, beaming like a teenager on prom night. He offered his arm, and she took it with no hesitation. I stayed in the vehicle. This wasn't my scene to play out. I was there only to observe. As they reached the restaurant entrance, a man in a tailored black suit, Jonathan's chosen process server, made his way toward them, moving with calm purpose. Just as they were settling into their seats, he approached their table and spoke clearly enough that even through the restaurant glass, I caught the words. "Melissa Lawson?" She looked up puzzled. "Yes?" He handed her the envelope directly. "You've been served." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away. At that point, I exited the car. Melissa noticed me instantly. Her face shifted to disbelief. Lucas stiffened in his seat, unsure whether to stand or stay put. I stepped up to their table, my tone steady and quiet. "Your access to the house ends at midnight. Whatever you need has been packed and placed in storage. From this point forward, all contact goes through legal representation." She opened her mouth, then paused, unable to speak. No denial, no outrage, just silence. Lucas stared down at his menu like it might offer a way out. I didn't stay long. I turned and left them there, seated and stunned, in the heart of a crowded dining room. When I returned to my car, I glanced back once. She was still holding the envelope, her face pale, frozen under the soft lighting of the restaurant. That, in truth, was the final moment of our marriage. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet delivery of consequence. Close to midnight, she returned to the house. From my seat at the kitchen table, I watched her try the front door twice before realizing the locks had been changed. Her silhouette appeared at the window, followed by a knock. "Craig, open the door." I stood, opened it halfway, and handed her a folded sheet of paper. "Your things are ready. The rest is at the storage facility. The address and key are inside. You can retrieve them tomorrow." Her voice faltered. "You're really ending 24 years like this?" I met her eyes and didn't flinch. "No, you ended it at Skyline. I just finalized the ending." She pressed her lips together, searching for something to say, but nothing came. I closed the door, locked it, and returned to the table. By the time Monday came, word had begun to circulate at her office. Someone had seen her out with Lucas that night and pieced together the story after watching her get served in public. HR called her in for a meeting. Since Lucas was a contractor for the company, their policy was clear. Any romantic involvement had to be formally disclosed. Melissa was placed on administrative leave while they conducted an internal review. That evening, a mutual acquaintance informed me she was now staying with Tara Whitfield, an old friend from her college years. Meanwhile, Lucas began to back away. The scrutiny and professional fallout weren't what he had signed up for. I didn't have to eavesdrop to know what their conversations sounded like. I could already predict the unraveling. At home, the shift was tangible. The air itself felt lighter. For the first time in what felt like ages, I ate a meal without that dense, invisible pressure hanging over the table. The sting of betrayal had cut deep, but how I chose to respond, that was mine to own. And in this moment, maintaining that control meant everything. Midway through the week, Melissa called. There was a softness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "Craig, can we talk? Just us, please." I didn't pause. "Only with a mediator present. If you want to talk, it won't be private. It'll be supervised." There was a short silence on the line. "A mediator? That seems unnecessary. Can't we just sort this out ourselves?" "It is necessary," I said evenly. "I'm not opening the door for anything that takes us backward." 2 days later, we sat across from one another in a quiet conference room. The mediator, Asha Patel, composed and well-versed in family law, began the session with calm authority. Melissa spoke first. "I'm not here to create more conflict, I just want what's fair." I slid a folder across the table toward her. Inside were the images, texts, and receipts connected to Harper. "Fairness begins with truth," I said, "and this doesn't leave much space for pretending." As she flipped through the contents, her face paled. She turned slightly toward Asha, as if looking for help, but the mediator only offered a calm nod, silently prompting her to continue. Then I laid out the agreement. I would retain ownership of the house. The retirement assets would be divided, though with a tilt in my favor. She'd keep her vehicle and receive a payout equal to her share. Going forward, all communication would go through a co-parenting app, even though there were no children at home. I wanted everything on record. Her jaw set tightly. "That feels like overkill." "It's clarity," I replied. "No space for games, just clear lines and structure." With the proof I had, Melissa didn't have much ground to challenge me. Of course, she could try her luck in court, but the facts were on my side, and all litigation would do was drain more money. Eventually, she let out a slow, defeated breath and gave a small nod. "All right, I'll sign the temporary agreement." Asha collected the papers, her voice even. "This is a good step. Cooperation will only ease the road ahead." Melissa looked at me, searching for any sign I might waver, any crack in my stance. But my expression didn't change. Hands still, face unreadable. There was nothing left in me to yield. The final settlement hearing came sooner than I'd expected. By then, her lawyer had gone through everything and saw no value in prolonging it. She agreed to the terms we had outlined. The house, the retirement accounts, the structure we'd already defined, it all held firm. When the judge asked for her confirmation, her voice was barely audible. "Yes." She walked past me without making eye contact. By that point, Lucas had vanished. The moment her job began to collapse under scrutiny, he disappeared. HR wrapped up their inquiry with a demotion. She lost her oversight duties, took a pay cut, and was moved to a lower-level position. What happened in her world after that, I didn't track. My focus had shifted to my own path. I started running again. Early mornings before work, when the streets were quiet. Some nights I'd have dinner with Naomi. Simple, steady company without emotional weight. Later, I reconnected with Elena Morales, someone I'd once known from a running group. We kept it easy, nothing heavy, just honest, uncomplicated conversation, and it felt good. One evening, Melissa's name appeared in my inbox. The message was brief. No theatrics, no spin. Craig, I know I damaged something I can't undo. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to hear it. I read the message twice before responding. Acknowledged. Boundaries remain. That was all. No bitterness, no extra words. The line I had drawn stayed firm. At home, the quiet no longer felt suffocating. It felt earned. It felt like peace. My days settled into a rhythm that belonged only to me. Melissa had made her decision that Friday night. Mine had followed shortly after. A full year passed before the final divorce decree arrived in the mail. The envelope was thin, but it carried the weight of decades. 24 years, distilled into one stamped conclusion. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer. That weekend, I opened a cabinet and took down the last 2 red wine glasses, the ones Melissa had used the night she told me she needed space. I placed them in a donation box. Just glass. But they marked the beginning of the end. Sunday evening, I opened my home for a quiet dinner with close friends. Naomi showed up with a steaming casserole dish, while Elena brought along a bottle of wine. We shared food, traded stories, and laughed with an ease I hadn't felt in ages, as though the house had finally exhaled. For once, conversation flowed without tension hiding beneath it. Once they'd left and the front door clicked shut, I stayed seated at the table, the same spot where everything had first begun to come apart. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Melissa. Craig, I see things more clearly now. You handled it all with grace and strength I didn't deserve. I wish you nothing but peace ahead. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly placed the phone face down on the table. There was nothing left to say. Her words gave me the closure I hadn't needed until now. Stepping onto the porch, I let the crisp night air wash over me. I was no longer entangled in the ripple effects of her choices. My direction was mine again, quiet, steady, and deliberate. This time, I was the one defining what came next. After 24 years of marriage, she made her choice on a Friday night when she walked out for a date. I had answered, not with desperation, but with clarity, formal papers, and a carefully executed plan. In that act, I hadn't merely ended a chapter. I had reclaimed authorship of my own story.